It started during the December of my junior year, when the air was crisp and the nights crept in sooner than anyone wanted them to. I lived in upstate New York, in a small town nestled between hills and heavily wooded areas that wrapped around forest roads like slender arms. Our house was old, one of the oldest in town, and though it had its quirks, it was the kind of place that felt more like an old friend than a shelter. That winter, though, something changed. By day, things seemed as normal as ever, but at night, as the darkness thickened outside, there was a discomfort in the air. I remember the first night it started. I had been studying for an upcoming history exam, books sprawled across my bed, when I felt an overwhelming urge to leave my room. It wasn't fear exactly, rather an undefined sense of unease. I brushed it off, attributing it to stress, and continued reviewing my notes. But that pressing feeling continued, like an itch in the back of my mind. The house, usually so warm and welcoming, began to feel empty in its silence. I heard footsteps in places where there should have been none, faint and soft, as if someone else paced the upstairs hallway while I sat alone in my room. My parents were sound asleep by then, their snores echoing faintly up the stairs. I listened for what felt like hours, telling myself it must be the old creaky floors settling or the wind stirring the trees outside my window. One night, while I was lying in bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, the silence was shattered by a noise that was undeniably real, a soft knock, followed by a faint scraping sound. It came from the attic, a place I had rarely ventured. It was cold up there, a part of the house that never seemed to warm, filled with boxes of old holiday decorations and sentimental artifacts my parents couldn't bear to part with. I lay still, heart pounding, straining to hear if it would come again. After a few minutes, the noise stopped, replaced by the usual night sounds. Sleep was hard to find after that. Curiosity eventually got the better of me. One Saturday afternoon, when my parents were out, I dragged the wooden stepladder down from the hall closet and propped it under the attic hatch. With a deep breath, I pushed the square panel upward and hoisted myself through, careful not to let the door slam shut behind me. The attic was filled with dust motes dancing in the streams of light coming from the small window at the far end. I cautiously began to explore, pushing aside stacks of neglected boxes. Everything seemed undisturbed, almost too undisturbed. Something in the air felt stale. I shook my head, trying to dismiss it as just another symptom of the age of the house. The daylight began to fade. Shadows stretched longer across the wooden floor. I didn't notice I was shivering until the cold bit through my sweater. Shoving down the feeling of being watched, I forced myself to leave, intending to tell my parents what I'd been hearing. But by the time evening rolled around, the courage of the afternoon was gone, replaced once more by doubt and self-convincing explanations. I didn't mention the attic exploration to anyone, and for a few days, nothing unusual happened. Until one night, the noise returned, more insistent than before, repetitive knocking, so soft as if it was calling out, yet timid all the same, followed again by a scratch, almost methodical. I sat up in bed, clenching the blanket, listening. The knocking moved, seeming to glide along the walls, descending through the house. My stomach twisted, an unfamiliar dread settling in my bones. It was becoming difficult to tell what was real and what wasn't. And then, there were moments when I thought I glimpsed movement from the corner of my eye, a shadow shifting just beyond my bedroom door, retreating into the dimly lit corridor. It all began to blur into the unsettling feeling of being constantly on edge, like a constant companion. Eventually, I brought it up to my mom, aiming to frame it as casual curiosity about the house's noises. To my surprise, she frowned, a shadow passing over her face. "I think you're just spooking yourself," she said, a note of discomfort in her voice that didn't go unnoticed. The way her eyes darted towards the staircase as she spoke was small, but it rang louder than her words. Christmas approached, and the season was miserable under the cloak of early darkness. I avoided the attic, resisting the temptation to investigate further. But the house, with every creak and groan, felt less like a home and more an entity unto itself, a living, breathing creature with secrets it did not intend to reveal. In a final attempt to put my mind at ease, I asked Dad about the attic, feigning interest in using the space for storage. His reaction was similar to Mom's, a flicker of hesitation, but he tried to joke it away. You won't be storing much up there. The place is half rotted away. We should board it up, he said, chuckling nervously, though his eyes remained transfixed on the ceiling, as if seeing something I couldn't. New Year's came, and with it, the heavy burden of anticipation. I awoke around midnight one night to the feeling of suffocating dread. This time, it was no mere knocking. An insistent rhythmic thud echoed directly above, precisely in the corner of my room where the ceiling sloped down to meet the walls. I was frozen in place, listening as it continued on for longer than ever before, the sound sliding languidly down the hallway outside my room. Unable to bear it any longer, I got up, the floorboards cold against my bare feet, and turned on every light as I made my way into the hallway. There, I found nothing out of the ordinary, save for that ominous silence that felt like it was swallowing sound. I stood there, shivering in the dim light, unsure of what to do next. Then I realized there was something else. An unfamiliar Polaroid sitting on the top step of the staircase leading up to the attic. I picked it up, my fingers brushing against the faded edges. It was a photo of a smiling family that wasn't mine, posed in front of a Christmas tree that didn't exist in our house. Chills coursed through me as I turned the image over. On the back, in handwriting that looked hurried and unfamiliar, were two words, "We're here." My skin prickled as I placed it back where I had found it, 1,000 questions pounding in my mind. How had it come to be there without anyone noticing? And who could have left it? The days stretched on. My parents were increasingly on edge, hypersensitive to shifts of light and sound, though they never admitted anything was wrong. The atmosphere hung heavy with tension, and the walls seemed to tighten with each passing evening. The fear became a part of our daily lives until spring, when the days grew longer, chasing away shadows with long streams of warmth. By then, whatever strange presence had haunted us in those dark months seemed to grow faint and eventually fell silent. The knocking ceased, the house's silence becoming just a silence and nothing more. But the terror had left its mark. To this day, every creak in an old home, every shiver of cold in the night, reminds me of it. Of how outwardly normal life can be one moment, only to shift dramatically the next without warning, all without leaving a trace of what it was. I've moved away now, living in a new kind of normal, far from that little town. Yet sometimes, deep in the dead of night, when the wind howls outside my window, I still hear the echo of that elusive knocking, faint but persistent, as if waiting, just temporarily resting in the chorus of forgotten sounds.